Welcome back, everyone. It's good to see you here back at the lake. Today, I am excited. I'm genuinely excited. We have been talking about this for so long. Now that the shed is finally here, we moved a lot of stuff out, and we finally have room in the garage to start the much anticipated and long awaited golf cart build on the 2016 Precedent. We're also going to be taking care of a couple of maintenance items, so be sure to stick around for that. As you can see behind me, we have a stack of parts here that are all upgrades for our 2016 Precedent. So to start off, what we have is the Rhox 6-inch double independent A-arm suspension lift kit paired with the Mods HD rear leaf springs, because we're going to need the support for the new Mad Jack's 2 rear passenger seat assembly. Finally, we're going to round out the build by installing new wheels, a windshield, and we're going to probably throw some graphics on it too. Okay, so let's get the golf cart over here. Let's get it up on jack stands, and let's start taking it apart. All right, let's go over the tools we're gonna need. What I have here is a 3/8 Allen wrench. I have a 15mm wrench, a 13mm, and a 10mm wrench. I have 2 adjustable wrenches, and I have an impact gun. The sockets that we're gonna need a 19mm, we're gonna need a 15/16. We're gonna come over here, we're gonna get us a 10mm deep and short. We're gonna get us a 15mm deep and short, and a 13mm deep and short. That should get this whole job done. All right, let's check out these parts. Okay, the first thing that came with the kit is the front suspension assembly. You can see it already has the spring attached to it and the spring mounts. Next, we got some thread locker. 2 small plates here are the centering plates for the rear springs. These 2 here are the shock mount plates. Over here, we have the 2 upper A-arm assemblies, driver side and passenger side. You can see here, they have the grease fitting already in them, and they also have the bushings already installed in both sides, so that's going to save us some time and some work. Over here are the 2 rear lift blocks. So your driver side and passenger side spindles. And you can see we have here 2 bags of hardware. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this headlight and bumper assembly using a 10mm wrench and a 13mm socket. There's 2 bolts, 1 on each side, and it just slides right out. I'm going to disconnect our wiring harness for our lights. And there it is. All right, now we're going to remove both front hubs and set those aside because we're going to be reusing those. All right, next we're going to be releasing these lower shock mount bolts. This is a 13mm, and there's a welded nut on the back side, so we don't need a wrench. We're going to do this to both sides. I'm going to release our shock. We're going to push it up out of the way. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our tie rods here. We're going to do this on both sides. All right, then we're going to just pull the tie rod up and get it out of the way. Now our spindle's free. The spindle's kind of tight too. Next, we got to get this steering gear out of the way so we can get to these upper control arm bolts back here. So we're going to do that by removing these three 13 millimeter bolts. All right, next we're going to be removing the two upper A-arms, which is these 13 millimeter bolts right here. We don't need to worry about a wrench on the back side because there's welded nuts on the back. Okay, the last thing there is to do to get this front axle out of here is remove these 4 bolts. These are, of course, the bottom side of the bolts. The heads are underneath. We're going to have to get a 13 millimeter socket on there, and the whole axle will drop out in one piece. And there you go. All right, check it out. We got it out. You can see there's not much going on here from the OEM. It's a single spring design, which isn't very comfortable. It's fine for the golf course, but for regular riding around, we could do much better. All right, we're gonna begin our installation of the new front axle by putting our upper A-arms in. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this upper A-arm in, and using the bolt that we took out from earlier, we're gonna bolt it back in. Remember, these are the ones that have the nuts on the back, so you don't have to worry about a second wrench. All right, here's a hot tip for you. If you got something going on like this and you need to put thread locker on, the manufacturer requires we put thread locker on these new bolts. So what we're gonna do, instead of locking the bolt, we're gonna just pour a little bit right in these holes here. When the bolts come up, they'll run through the thread locker and get dispersed evenly. And that way, we don't have to make a mess. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our steering gear at this time with the bolts that we took out from earlier. We're going to continue with our installation. If you remember, there was welded nuts on the other shock mount. On this one there is not, so they supply you with bolts, washers, and nuts so you can attach your shock to the new upper A-arm. We're going to put a little bit of thread locker on these bolts right here, just a little bit. And we're going to install our spindles. Okay, we're also going to install our tie rod ends at this time using the hardware that we took off from earlier. All right, we're going to do the same thing to the other side. We can now reinstall our hubs. All right, one thing to take note of while we're doing this is that the spring is underneath the axle at this point. When we take this spring off and we install the new heavy-duty axle with the spacer block, the spring is going to change from underneath, and we're going to put it on top of the axle. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to take this nut off the lower shock mounting. We're going to retain this hardware. I'm going to push the shock up to remove the bushing. Push the shock up out of the mounting hole. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be removing these nuts from this U-bolt, but we're going to be retaining the shock mount plate. And now we're going to be removing the lower hanger bolt from the shackle. Okay, now we remove the front bolt, and now our spring comes free. So let's take a look at these springs real quick. You can see Of course, the original spring is on the top and the replacement is on the bottom. You can see that these are directional, and you could tell that by the center bolts, okay? They're not really in the center, okay? This is the rear of the vehicle. You'll notice we have the arrow. It's pointed to the rear just so we can show you how these don't line up. So when we flip this around, you can now see how the center bolts line up and our ends are lined up on both sides. It's a little bit off because you can tell how much more spring is in the new one than in the old one. The old one basically lays flat. All right, let's go ahead and get it installed. Okay, next what we got to do is prepare our lower plate. The 1/4 inch bolt through the hole and the nylock nut. What this is going to do is it's going to provide spring alignment for the underneath of the axle, because we're moving the spring from the bottom of the axle to the top. So we need an alignment marker because there's a hole underneath that this needs to fit into so everything stays straight. Next, we're going to take our new perch. We're going to put it over the axle with a slope facing towards the front of the cart. Next, we're going to put in our spring on top. All right, next we're going to slip the spring back in while making sure this center bolt lines up with the hole in the new perch. Okay, now that the spring is in, we're going to install the new shock mount right on top of the spring like that. And we're going to install our new spring bolts. All right, there it is. Lift kit's on. All the wheels are on. All the adjustments are made. I think it looks pretty good. All right, stay tuned. We got a lot more pieces to put on this golf cart build. We got a rear seat, we got a windshield, we got all kinds of stuff. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.